EU is finding itself, isn't it, where it was at the end of last year, running a deficit with China and calling on Beijing to do more to rein in Russian aggression. So divisions clearly remain. Will this summit change anything?
The summit will not change anything concerning this because the huge deficit cannot be resolved in a very short time. And on the other side, China is not ready to reduce its support to Russia. So probably there won't be any major outcomes of the visit of Wang Yi to Europe.
China, however, is increasingly being perceived by European politicians and policymakers as a potential hedge against an unpredictable United States. Is this a viable strategy? And in practical terms, how then would policymakers make this a reality?
So, in theory, it would be possible to take China as a possible, let's say, alternative to the United States. But in reality, it will not happen because I believe that on the American side, they will also try to find the modus vivendi with the European counterparts, so they will not burn all the bridges that they have with Europe. And concerning China, I cannot see how China will accept to reduce the huge deficit that they have with the European Union. We are talking about more than $300 billion. So it is very important for China to continue to deal with Europe because precisely the relationship with the United States is not the best one.
So in the current environment, incrementalism, positive small steps in the right direction are the best that we can hope for. Cédomir, following on from Beijing's rare earth minerals agreement with the United States then, is there scope at this summit for China to end restrictions on rare earth exports to the European Union?
So this is the card that China has because the Europeans, but also the United States, they badly need the critical raw materials and the magnets because they need them for the electrical vehicles. They need them also concerning the computers and electronic material. So obviously, this is a card they have in their sleeve in order to show. But at the same time, I don't think that China will play very hard on this. I think that China is first looking for a compromise and looking for having good relationship with the European Union. So at the end of the day, there would be some kind of a deal between the European Union and China.
Cédomir, let's take a step back to 2020 and the in-principle agreement of the comprehensive agreement on investment between the EU and China. It never really saw the light of day, though, has it? Because of sanctions, because of political tensions. Can this summit revive the CAI?
Yes, it can revive it because China has already indicated that it is ready to invest in the European Union, especially concerning the electrical vehicles. So they had some spots in mind. It can be Hungary, it can be Portugal, it can be some other countries. So I do believe that now China is ready to invest because in that case, if they invest in Europe, it will be European production, so it will not be counted as an important element in the deficit that the European Union has with China. And conversely, China can also say, okay, we can ease some kind of investment in China for the European companies, but they first believe of the Chinese investments in the European Union.
Interesting you mentioned EVs, Cédomir. From a sector point of view, are EVs where China and the European Union can stake out some common ground, despite the fact that it wasn't too long ago, was it, that the EU itself imposed additional tariffs of close to 40% on Chinese EVs?
So this was a problem concerning the EVs. On one side, the European Union has a goal in order to achieve some kind of supremacy of EVs by 2035, and at the same time, the European Union doesn't produce enough of EVs. So there is no magical formula. So in that case, we have to accept the Chinese EVs, either as imports to the European Union, either as manufacturing in the European Union by BYD and by some other companies. So I believe there must be some kind of agreement, otherwise the European Union cannot meet its target in 2035.
Again, let's get back to the politics and turn our attention to the Uyghurs in China. And that really was the reason why Beijing sanctioned several MEPs about 4 years ago, I believe it was, because of alleged because they raised alleged human rights violations against the Uyghur Muslim minority in Xinjiang. Is China in any way prepared to lift those sanctions on the European lawmakers in a bid to get a deal done with the European Union?
It will be very difficult for China to change this kind of image that China has in Western countries about the Uyghur population, because in that case, they had to be very active, not only in the European Union, but also in the United States. So I believe that in the future, they will just say this is a negative campaign against China, but it will not have an influence concerning the economic operations, overall economic operations for China. This is something that we have to bear with. So I don't think that it will be any action concerning the Chinese side in order to reverse the situation. They will just say it is what it is. There is a negative opinion about Xinjiang. There is a negative opinion about the treatment of the Uyghur population, but we cannot change it.
Cédomir, do you feel that EU member states have really got to grips with the national security implications of state-run or state-linked Chinese companies buying strategic assets, technology and infrastructure, since this has been an issue, hasn't it, in the past with Huawei and ZTE?
Exactly, and the European officials, they warned about that. That is, Kaja Kallas was talking about the unfair conditions that we have coming from China, and Ursula von der Leyen, during the latest NATO meeting, she was talking about the China shock. So within the China shock, we also have this state-owned enterprises that we don't know exactly what they are doing. Are they cooperating? Don't they cooperate? But it's the kind of support they have from the Chinese state in terms of dumping, in terms of preferential agreements concerning energy delivery or concerning some other, let's say, access to the bank credits. So there are plenty of issues concerning the state-owned companies in order to see how do they operate. And beyond the state-owned companies, we also have the private companies. But the private companies, they also have to cooperate with the state, so we are not sure about how to deal with them.